Chosen. 1. God is not waiting for you to become perfect. He is waiting for something else, something you already did not on a stage, not in a prayer meeting, but in silence, in a moment no one witnessed. That moment registered in heaven in ways you did not expect. This is not a video about miracles or sudden breakthroughs. This is confirmation God saw something in you, and you need to know what He saw. You have been doing the right things, praying when it felt hollow, giving when your account was low, staying faithful when every logical reason told you to leave, and life did not respond. No sign, no shift, no echo from heaven. Just silence, the kind that sits on your chest at 2 in the morning and makes you wonder if the ceiling is the only thing listening. And one night, not the night you cried, because those are countless, but the night you had nothing left to cry, you lay in the dark, and a thought surfaced. Quiet, honest, almost too honest. I am doing all of this, for who you immediately felt ashamed. Tried to push it away with a verse, a worship song, anything, but it would not leave. It sat in your chest, heavy and true and unmovable, and you thought, this must be the beginning of losing my faith. You tried to pray past it. You tried to worship over it. But once honesty surfaces, it does not sink back down quietly. That question was not what you think it was. It was not doubt destroying you. It was honesty qualifying you. And the difference between those two things is the entire foundation of what you are about to hear. Here is what most people never learn. God is not moved by your performance. He is moved by your honesty when performance runs out. The moment you stopped pretending everything was fine, the moment you admitted to God that you were running on fumes and could not feel Him anymore, that was the moment heaven leaned forward. Not because weakness is impressive, but because honesty opens a door that performance keeps permanently locked. When you say, I cannot do this anymore, not to the void, not to despair, but directly to God, you are not failing. You are making room, and the architect of your life works best in rooms you have emptied of your own ability to manage. This is the distinction that anchors everything in this message, the difference between perfection and readiness. Most people believe God is waiting for them to be more faithful, more disciplined, more put together, more worthy. So they spend years polishing the surface, managing the appearance of faith, performing the version of themselves they assume heaven requires, and they wonder why nothing moves. But look at Scripture. God never chose the polished. He chose the honest. Moses at the burning bush, terrified, stuttering, begging God to send someone else. Exodus chapter 3. God did not say, come back when you feel confident. He said, I will be with you. Moses' readiness was not competence. It was the raw admission that he had none, and that admission, not his resume, not his eloquence, was what God called qualified. Readiness is not confidence. It is not the absence of fear or doubt. Readiness is what remains after every mask has fallen and every I am fine has expired, and what stands there is just you, hands empty, saying, I do not understand what you are doing, but I have not walked away. That is the signal God watches for, not a sign in the sky, not a prophet at your door. The signal is you still standing, still open after everything that was designed to make you quit. If something in you is responding right now, not excitement, not hype, but a quiet recognition, like hearing your own story told back to you by someone who was there, then stay with me, because what follows will reframe everything you thought you knew about the last season of your life. The season you thought was destroying you was building you. The silence you read as abandonment was preparation from an architect who does not explain the blueprint while the foundation is still being poured. And the question you were most ashamed of, where are you? God turns out to be the exact question he was waiting for you to be honest enough to ask. It did not disqualify you. It qualified you. And what it qualified you for requires a foundation that only raw honesty can build. Perfection builds impressive walls. Honesty builds foundations that hold weight. And the architect is not interested in beautiful walls right now. He is engineering a foundation strong enough to carry what he is about to place on your life, in your purpose, in your provision, in your calling. The pain was not random. The silence was not empty. And you, exactly as you are, fractures and all, are the material he has been preparing. What comes next will change how you see everything that has happened and everything that is about to begin. The pain had a blueprint. You could not see it then because no one can read an architectural plan while they are standing inside the construction site. Dust everywhere, noise, things being torn down that you thought were permanent. From the inside it looked like destruction. From above, from where the architect stands, it was excavation. And excavation always looks like ruin to the person standing in the hole. Think about the last several months. What was the first thing that fell apart? Maybe it was financial, a number that dropped when it should have held. Maybe relational, someone who left when they should have stayed. Maybe internal, a certainty about your future that dissolved overnight into questions you could not answer. Whatever it was, it started a chain. One thing fell, then another. And you did what anyone would do. You tried to hold the pieces together. Hands full, arms stretched, trying to keep everything in place. But the more you held, the more slipped through. Here is what you were not told. You were not failing to hold things together. The architect was deliberately removing things that did not belong in the new structure, not because those things were bad. Some of them were good. Good relationships, good opportunities, good seasons. But good and assigned are not the same thing. A good brick placed in the wrong wall weakens the entire building, and God was not being cruel when he removed it. He was being precise. What happened next after the removal was quieter and harder to name. You entered a season that did not look like anything. Not crisis, not breakthrough, not even stagnation. It just felt like waiting in an empty room. That season had a purpose you could not feel at the time, and it carried 3 tests embedded in it, tests you did not know you were taking. The first was the test of loss. When something important was stripped from your life, a role, an income, a relationship, an opportunity, your first instinct was to grip tighter, to negotiate, to fix. That is the human response, and there is no shame in it. But at some point, your grip failed. Not because you chose to release, because you were too exhausted to hold. And in that exhaustion, something shifted. You stopped negotiating with God and started asking a different question, not give it back, but what are you doing? That question, born from fatigue rather than faith, was the right answer. Releasing when you have no strength left to grip is the most honest form of trust there is. And God recorded it not as surrender, but as qualification. The second was the test of silence. After the loss came the quiet. Prayers that felt like they dissolved before they reached the ceiling. Worship that tasted like dust. Mornings where you opened your Bible and the words sat flat on the page, true but unreachable like food behind glass when you are starving. And you kept going, not because you felt God listening. You kept going because you did not know what else to do. That not knowing what else to do, heaven registered it as faithfulness. because the test was never whether you could hear God in the silence. The test was whether you would keep showing up when you heard nothing. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 1. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me. Habakkuk heard nothing, but he stood there. The test was not the hearing, it was the standing. The third was the test of honesty, the one from chapter 1 that you thought disqualified you. The moment you said to God, or thought without saying, I do not understand, I cannot feel you, I am tired of pretending I can. That was not collapse, that was the final test. Because the architect needed to know when every external support is removed and every internal feeling has dried up what is left. What remained in you was not impressive faith. It was raw, undecorated honesty directed at God rather than away from Him. And that distinction toward Him, not away, is what separates doubt that destroys from doubt that qualifies. These 3 tests were not random. They followed a sequence the architect designed. Loss stripped the excess, silence tested your staying power. Honesty revealed your foundation. Each one prepared you for the next. You could not have been honest if you had not first endured the silence. You could not have endured the silence if loss had not first emptied your hands of everything you were gripping. This was not punishment. This was curriculum, a training program you never enrolled in but have now completed. And the architect does not hand out certificates. He hands out assignments. Assignments that require exactly the foundation that was just built inside you through loss, through silence, through honesty spoken in the dark. The construction is not finished, but the foundation is set. And what comes next requires something specific from you, a tactical shift that most people never learn because no one teaches it in church. It is not about doing more, it is about recovering what you have been pouring out in the wrong direction. You have been bleeding energy and did not know it. Not the dramatic kind, not burnout that puts you in bed for a week. The slow kind. The kind that drains you one conversation at a time, one explanation at a time, one attempt to be understood at a time. And by the end of each day, you are empty, not because you worked too hard, but because you gave access to people and spaces that were never meant to carry what you are carrying. Let me be specific. Think about the last time you tried to explain to someone what God is doing in your life. You chose your words carefully. You were vulnerable. You shared something real, a shift. You felt a direction. You sensed a decision you made based on what you heard in prayer. And they looked at you the way someone looks at a child describing an imaginary friend. Polite, slightly concerned. Then they changed the subject. Or worse, they nodded and said, "That is nice," with a tone that made nice sound like delusional. That moment cost you something. Not because they were cruel. Most of them were not. It cost you because you poured sacred water into a container that could not hold it. And every time you do that, every time you open the deepest part of your journey to someone without the capacity to receive it, a piece of your clarity leaves with it. You walk away feeling smaller. Not because you are small, but because you handed something precious to someone who did not know its weight. This is the first tactical shift, strategic withdrawal, not isolation, not bitterness, not "I do not need anyone." This is the deliberate decision to stop spending spiritual energy in spaces that give no return, not financial return, not emotional return, but alignment return. The question is no longer who wants to hear my story. The question is who has the capacity to carry what I am about to share. And if the answer is no one in the room, then silence is not weakness. Silence is stewardship. There is a Hebrew concept called nistar, chosen hiddenness. It does not mean hiding because you are afraid. It means concealing because you are protecting. When you have the ability to speak but choose to be quiet. When you could announce but decide to wait. When you could prove yourself but let God prove you instead. That is Nistar, and it is one of the most disciplined forms of spiritual practice that exists because it forces you to live for an audience of one. Jesus practiced this constantly. After healing a leper in Mark chapter 1 verse 44, he said, "Tell no one," not because he wanted secrecy for its own sake, because there are seasons when hiddenness protects the work before it is mature enough to survive exposure. A seed buried in soil does not need sunlight yet. It needs darkness. It needs cover. Premature exposure does not accelerate growth. It interrupts it. 3 things you need to stop sharing immediately. First, stop sharing unfinished plans with people who do not carry your vision. When God drops something in your spirit, a business idea, a relocation, a career shift, a ministry direction, your first instinct is to tell someone, to get feedback, to feel validated. But validation from the wrong source is more dangerous than silence, because if they do not see it, their doubt becomes a voice in your head that competes with what God already told you. Keep the seed buried until it has roots. Second, stop explaining your changes to people who only know the old version of you. They will measure your new direction against your old patterns and conclude that something is wrong with you. They are not qualified to assess what God is building because they are using the old blueprint. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your growth. Growth is not a crime that requires a defense. Third, stop seeking confirmation from sources God did not assign as your confirmation. Not every friend is a counselor. Not every mentor hears from God for your specific situation. When you scatter your questions across too many voices, you get noise, not clarity. The architect speaks in specifics. Committees speak in generalizations. Learn the difference. Now picture this. You are sitting alone, maybe late afternoon, maybe early morning, and for the first time in months, you are not explaining yourself to anyone, not defending a decision, not justifying why you believe what you believe. You're just sitting in the quiet, and the quiet is not empty this time. Something returns, subtle like the first full breath after running too long. Clarity, weight, an internal gravity that had been leaking out through every unnecessary conversation. That is not self-care. That is sacred recovery, the retrieval of what you gave away to the wrong places. And it changes everything that follows, because the energy you recover here is the exact energy required for the next phase. The silence was not punishment. The silence was preparation. And what you now carry in that recovered space needs protection, because without boundaries, it will drain again by tomorrow morning. What comes next is the wall that guards it. Not a wall against people. A wall around the assignment. The first boundary you need is not with another person. It is with the voice inside your own head, the one that narrates your life in a language you did not choose and never agreed to. It has been running so long you mistake it for your own thinking. But it is not thinking, it is a script, and most of it was written by experiences that no longer apply to who you are becoming. Before you can guard your energy from the wrong people, you have to stop the leak at the source. And the source is internal. It is the story you tell yourself when no one else is talking, the quiet, automatic assessment that runs underneath everything you do. It sounds like this: you are behind. You are not enough. Everyone else figured it out except you. That voice does not shout. It whispers. And whispers repeated daily become architecture, the invisible structure your entire life is built on without your conscious permission. This is not about spiritual warfare in the dramatic sense. This is about narrative replacement. The voice is not a demon. It is a pattern, a deeply grooved mental habit formed by years of disappointment, comparison, and unprocessed pain. You do not need to cast it out. You need to overwrite it. And you overwrite a pattern the same way it was installed, through repetition, but this time with intention. There are 3 narratives that need to be dismantled right now, not next month, not when you feel stronger. Now, because every day they run unchallenged is another day the old foundation competes with what the architect is building. The first narrative is, I am late. It sounds reasonable. You look around, people your age have careers, homes, families, stability. You have questions, uncertainty, and a savings account that makes you wince. So the voice concludes, you missed the window. The train left. You are too far behind to catch up. But this narrative operates on a human timeline, and the architect does not use human timelines. Abraham received his promise at 75. Joseph went from prison to prime minister in a single day. Moses spent 40 years in a desert before his assignment even began. The architect compresses and expands time according to foundation readiness, not calendar logic. When your foundation is set, the building can rise in a single season, regardless of how long the excavation took. The second narrative is, I am not enough. This one is quieter and more corrosive. It does not always announce itself directly. Sometimes it hides behind self-deprecation disguised as humility. I am just not gifted like that, or someone else could do this better. But humility is not self-diminishment. Humility is accurate self-assessment in light of God's design. And God's assessment of you was spoken before you ever failed, before you ever doubted, before you ever fell short. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. My power is made perfect in weakness. The Greek word for weakness, asthenia, does not mean fragile or broken. It means inability to perform on your own. It is not a verdict on your worth. It is a condition for God's power to operate. You are not enough. You are in the exact condition where God does his most precise work. The third narrative is, everyone is blessed except me. Comparison is the most efficient destroyer of calling because it uses real data to build a false conclusion. You see someone else's breakthrough and your mind instantly constructs a case they were chosen, you were skipped, but you are comparing their chapter 15 with your chapter 3. You did not see their years of hiddenness. You did not witness their silence season. You only saw the result, and results never tell the full story. Psalm 37, verse 7. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways. David wrote that while he was running. While his own story looked nothing like success, he wrote it because he understood that God's economy does not operate on visible metrics. Now, here is the practice, not theory practice. Every morning before your hand reaches for your phone, before the first notification rewrites your internal state, speak directly to the narrative. Not out loud if that feels strange in your mind is enough. Say this: the old story is not the true story. I am being built, not abandoned. The timeline I cannot see is still moving. This is not affirmation. Affirmation says what you wish were true. This says what the architect has already declared, whether you feel it or not. The difference between delusion and faith is the source. If the source is your ego, it is wishful thinking. If the source is what God has spoken over your life, it is alignment. You do not control the construction schedule. You do not control when the walls go up or when the doors open. But you control which voice narrates the waiting. and the voice you feed each morning is the voice that shapes each day. Guard that first before you guard anything else. Because a mind running on the wrong narrative will sabotage every boundary you try to build after it. The internal wall comes first. Everything else is built on top of it. Your mind is quieter now. The old narratives have been named and the replacement has begun. But there is a second leak one that operates in plain sight, so common you have never questioned it. It comes out of your mouth every day, and it is shaping your reality faster than any prayer or plan, because words do not just describe your world, they build it. Proverbs 18 verse 21. The tongue has the power of life and death. This is not poetry. This is mechanics. Every sentence you speak about yourself is a seed, and spiritual seeds do not distinguish between serious declarations and casual comments. They only grow. When you say nothing ever works out for me over coffee with a friend, you are not venting, you are planting, and that seed does not need your permission to take root. Pay attention this week. Count how many times you say something self-diminishing without even noticing. I am terrible with money. I will never figure this out. Knowing my luck, it will fall apart. These are not observations. They are small prophecies, and they are working against everything the architect is constructing in your life. Not because God is fragile and your words override his plan, but because your words shape your expectations. Your expectations shape your behavior, and your behavior shapes your outcomes. The chain is mechanical. It operates whether you believe in it or not. There are 3 categories of speech that need to stop. The first is self-diminishing speech. Every sentence that begins with "I am just," or "I am not really," or "I could never." When God called Gideon in Judges chapter 6, he called him a mighty warrior. Gideon was hiding in a wine press at the time. God does not name you by your current circumstance. He names you by your design. When you contradict that design with your own mouth, you are not being humble. You are disagreeing with the architect's blueprint. Stop the sentence mid-breath if you have to. Silence is better than planting the wrong seed. The second is complaint as identity. There is a difference between expressing pain and building a personality around it. When every conversation defaults to what is wrong, the job, the finances, the relationships, the health complaint stops being release and becomes architecture. It becomes the house you live in. Israel complained for 40 years in the wilderness. The journey was supposed to take 11 days. Their words did not change the circumstance. Their words extended it. Complaint does not free you from the season. It renews the lease. The third is reverse prophecy sentences that predict the negative outcome before it arrives. This will probably fail. No one is going to choose me. Next year will be the same. These are not realistic assessments. They are declarations spoken into the future, and they carry weight whether you intend them to or not. You are using the same power that God used to speak the world into existence, the power of the spoken word, and aiming it at your own destruction, not with malice, with habit. And habits can be broken. So what replaces them? Not hollow affirmations. Not standing in front of a mirror saying, "I am wealthy and successful," when your account says otherwise. That is not faith. That is denial with a spiritual accent. What replaces them is aligned speech words that agree with what God has spoken even when you cannot see it yet. The difference sounds like this. Affirmation says, "I am rich." Aligned speech says, "God is working in my life." I do not see the full picture yet, but I am not forgotten. The first is ego. The second is faith with an anchor. One practice. Every night before your mind replays every failure of the day, because it will interrupt the cycle with one sentence. Today, God was still building. and I am still standing. Simple, true, enough. You do not need a 30-minute declaration. You need one honest sentence that aligns your speech with reality, not the reality you see, but the reality the architect is engineering behind what you see. Your mind has been guarded, your mouth has been calibrated, but there is a third layer, the most painful one, because it involves the people around you, not enemies, people you love, people who love you. And the question you have been avoiding, who gets to stay close in this next season and who needs to be loved from a distance. This is the boundary that costs the most. Not because it requires courage, though it does, but because it requires you to accept something your heart has been resisting. Not everyone who loves you belongs in the room where your next season is being built. And not everyone who was right for the last chapter has a role in the next one. You already feel it. There are people in your life, not enemies, not toxic personalities, just people, and after every interaction with them, you are lighter in the wrong way. Not lighter as in free, lighter as in drained. The conversation was fine, pleasant even. But something left you during it, a clarity you had before the call, an energy you carried before the visit. You dismiss that feeling because you believe loving someone means giving them full access. But love and access are not the same currency. Here is the principle that will protect your next season. Not everyone needs to be removed, but everyone needs to be placed. There are 3 levels of access, and confusing them is how most people drain what God just filled. The outer circle is public access. Co-workers, acquaintances, familiar faces at church or in your community. They receive kindness, courtesy, warmth, but they do not receive vulnerability. When they ask how you are doing, the answer is honest, but measured. I am good. Grateful. Moving forward. That is not dishonesty. That is stewardship. Not every question deserves your full story because not every person asking has the capacity to hold what you would give them. The middle circle is trusted access. A small number, real friends, close family, perhaps a mentor. These people know you are in a difficult season. They see the process. But here is the critical distinction: they are trusted with your journey, not with your direction. They can know what you are walking through. They do not get to approve or edit where God is leading you. Because even well-meaning people who love you will instinctively measure your next step against their own understanding, and their understanding does not have access to your blueprint. They see with natural eyes. The architect is leading you by a design they cannot read. The inner circle is sacred access. God. And perhaps 1 or 2 people who, when you speak, do not judge or advise, they pray. They do not try to fix what you share. They agree with the spirit in you. These are the only people who should hear the unfinished dreams, the unnamed fears, the direction God is drawing that does not make sense on paper yet. This circle is small by design. Jesus had 12 disciples, but only brought 3, Peter, James, and John, to the Mount of Transfiguration. He loved all 12. He did not give all 12 the same access. That was not favoritism. That was precision. Now the hard part, the guilt. Because the moment you start placing people at the right level of access, a voice will say, "This is selfish." A real Christian loves everyone equally. Boundaries are walls, and walls are unloving. That voice sounds spiritual, but it is not. Look at Jesus. He withdrew from crowds to pray alone. Luke 5, verse 16. He refused to stay and heal in one town because his assignment was in another. Mark 1, verse 38. He said no more than most people realize, not because he did not care, because he understood that assignment has priority over availability. You cannot serve everyone and steward what God specifically gave you. The two are mutually exclusive at certain points. Boundaries are not walls against love. They are fences around assignment. You are not being selfish when you protect what God entrusted to you. You are being responsible. The farmer who builds a fence around his field is not rejecting the world. He is protecting the harvest, because without the fence, anything wanders in and tramples what was planted. Some people will not understand. They will call it distance, coldness, arrogance. Let them. Your responsibility is not to manage their interpretation. Your responsibility is to steward the season God has placed you in. And that season requires a version of you that is not available when your energy is scattered across every open door. Chosen one. Your mind has been guarded. Your speech has been calibrated. Your circle has been defined. The foundation is complete. What comes next is not defense. It is operation, the activation of a kind of authority that does not announce itself, does not seek permission, and does not need applause to function. This is the peak, and it requires everything you just built. There is a kind of power that most people never access, not because it is hidden, but because they keep walking past it, looking for something louder. They expect authority to arrive with fanfare, a title, a platform, a moment where everyone in the room turns and recognizes them. But the power the architect builds does not operate that way. It does not announce. It does not campaign. It enters a room and shifts the atmosphere before a single word is spoken, and the person carrying it is often the last to recognize what they hold. You are closer to this than you think, not because you have arrived, but because of what you just survived. The loss that stripped your hands, the silence that tested your standing, the honesty that cracked your performance wide open, the boundaries that guarded what remained. Every phase was engineering not random suffering, but calculated preparation for a specific kind of internal authority, the kind that does not need external validation to function. This is the shift. The world defines power as control over people, circumstances, outcomes, perception. But the power that operates in the kingdom of God is independence, not independence from God, but independence from the need for human approval, from the need for immediate results, from the need to be understood before you move. When you reach the point where you stop trying to convince people you are worthy and simply operate from the position God placed you in, everything changes. Not because circumstances change first, but because you stop giving circumstances the authority to define you. There is a moment in your recent past, you may not have recognized it then, when this shift began. You were in a conversation, maybe at work, maybe at a gathering, maybe a phone call, and the old version of you would have spoken more, explained more, justified more, proved more. But this time something held you back, not fear, something quieter. You listened instead of performing. You spoke less but meant more. And you noticed something strange. People leaned in closer. Not because you were louder, because when a person stops needing the room to validate them, the room starts paying attention on its own. Gravity works that way. The denser the object, the stronger the pull, and density comes from what is carried internally, not from what is projected externally. That experience was not random social dynamics. That was the first evidence of operational authority, the kind that does not need a title to function, does not need a microphone to be heard, does not need a position to carry influence. And this kind of authority has direct consequences in the most practical areas of your life, your finances, your career, your decision-making. This is not abstract. Consider how most people operate in their careers. They take the first offer because they fear nothing else will come. They accept terms below their worth because the voice in their head, the one you dismantled in chapter 4, says, "Take what you can get before it disappears." That is a decision made from deficit, from unresolved internal scarcity. But a person operating from the position of divine approval, someone who knows they are being built for assignment, not scrambling for survival, makes decisions differently. They can wait for the right offer because they're not desperate for any offer. They can decline the good opportunity because they discern it is not the God opportunity. That is not arrogance. That is stewardship with discipline. The same principle applies to finances. A person living from internal scarcity spends to prove buying to appear successful, investing to seem intelligent, spending to fill the emptiness that spending never fills. But a person living from divine approval spends to build. Every dollar becomes a seed, not an ornament. Every financial decision is filtered through a single question: does this serve the assignment, or does it serve the image? The difference is not visible to outsiders. Both people might spend the same amount, but the motive behind each transaction is what determines whether it builds something lasting or evaporates by next month. Matthew 6, verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. The Greek word for added is prostithemi. It means placed alongside, not chased down, not begged for. Placed beside you as a natural consequence of correct alignment. When your internal priorities are ordered, when the architect's assignment comes before the ego's appetite, provision does not require pursuit. It arrives alongside the work. This is not a promise of wealth. This is a principle of alignment. When you stop spending energy proving yourself and redirect that energy toward building what you were assigned to build, resources do not just increase. They arrive with better timing, better terms, and better alignment with what you actually need. Not because you manipulated a spiritual formula, because the architect provisions what he commissions, and you have been commissioned whether you feel it yet or not. The question is no longer, am I worthy of this? The question is, am I operating from the right position? And that position, quiet, grounded, independent of applause, is where every significant decision of your next season needs to originate. Every significant decision you face in the coming season will fall into one of two categories. The first is decisions made from fear, fast, reactive, driven by the terror of missing out or falling behind. The second is decisions made from position, measured, anchored, filtered through the internal authority you have been building since chapter 1. The outcomes of these two categories are so different they might as well belong to separate lives. And the difference between them is not intelligence or strategy. It is origin. Where the decision is born determines where it leads. Decisions born from fear share a common signature speed. They feel urgent. Decide now or lose it forever. This is your only chance. Everyone else already said yes. That pressure is not discernment. It is manipulation, sometimes from external sources, sometimes from your own unresolved anxiety. God does not lead through panic. He has never once said, "Hurry before I change my mind." Every divine invitation carries a quality that fear-based opportunities cannot replicate: peace. Not the absence of tension, but a quiet, internal confirmation that this step aligns with what the architect is building. When that confirmation is absent, the absence itself is the answer. This matters because the coming season will present you with more open doors than you have seen in years. Not fewer, more. And that is where most people make the critical mistake. They assume every open door is from God because they have been waiting so long for any door to open. But an open door is not an endorsement. It is an invitation to discern, and discernment requires a skill that patience alone cannot teach. The ability to distinguish between what looks right and what is right. A true opportunity carries 3 markers. First, internal clarity. You can explain to yourself why this aligns without defensiveness or justification. Not, I have to take this because I might not get another chance, but this fits what I have been prepared for. Second, it does not require you to compromise what God already established in you, not even slightly. Just this once, and everyone does it, are the vocabulary of counterfeits. Third, the timing fits the season, not too early when the foundation is still setting, and not too late when you have already been moved past it. A counterfeit opportunity mimics all 3, but fails under examination. It carries manufactured urgency instead of peace. It requires small compromises framed as reasonable adjustments, and prayer over it feels foggy, not dark, not bright, just unclear. That fog is significant. When God confirms, there is clarity, even in difficulty. When God is silent on a matter, the silence is not permission. It is pause, and pause means wait. Here is where this becomes tangible in your financial life. An offer comes, better salary, better title, visible advancement. On paper, every box is checked. But it requires you to abandon the direction God planted in your spirit 6 months ago. It requires you to be available at hours that eliminate your prayer life. It requires a small ethical concession that everyone in the industry makes. That is not provision. That is a well-dressed distraction. And the cost of accepting it is not measured in money. It is measured in years, years spent building in the wrong direction, years that must be unwound before the architect can redirect you to the original plan. But there is a mastery higher than choosing the right door. It is the mastery of standing between 2 doors, the old season closed behind you, the new season not yet open before you, and holding your position. Most people cannot endure this space. It feels like nothing is happening, like the timeline has stalled, like you have been forgotten mid-construction. But this space between seasons is the most sacred ground in the entire process, because it is where the architect tests one final thing. Will you hold your position when there is nothing visible to hold on to? Habakkuk 2 verse 3. The vision awaits its appointed time. It will not delay. The Hebrew word for awaits also means to hold firm, like an anchor holding a ship steady while the current pulls. Waiting is not stillness. Waiting is active resistance against every current that tries to drag you from the position where the architect placed you. Hold your ground. The door that is meant for you does not require you to chase it. It does not require compromise as the price of entry. And when it opens, you will not have to wonder. There will be a recognition in your spirit, quiet but unmistakable, like hearing a language you have always known, but never been spoken to in before. That recognition is coming. What the architect has been building inside your mind, your speech, your circle, your authority was always leading here, not to a destination, to a position. And from that position, everything changes. Look back now, not with the eyes that saw each season as it happened, panicked, confused, searching for meaning in the middle of the noise, but with the eyes you have now. Eyes that have been trained through loss to release, through silence to stand, through honesty to qualify, through boundaries to protect, through mastery to operate without applause. From here, standing where you are right now, can you see it? The sequence was never random, every season connected to the next, like rooms in a building you could not see until you walked through all of them. The loss made space. The silence tested whether you could occupy that space without filling it with noise. The honesty revealed what was real in you when everything decorative was stripped away. The boundaries protected what remained. The mastery taught you to operate from it. And now positioning. The architect is placing you, not where you expected, not where your old plans pointed, but where the blueprint always indicated long before you knew how to read it. Positioning does not look dramatic from the inside. You are not standing on a mountaintop with a clear view of the horizon. You are probably in an ordinary place, same apartment, same commute, same daily rhythm. But something underneath has shifted. The ground feels different, even though it looks the same. And that is exactly how divine positioning works. The external does not change first. The internal changes, and then the external reorganizes around who you have become. There are signals that this repositioning is already active in your life. Not prophecies with timelines, not guarantees stamped with dates. Signals things already happening that you may have noticed, but not yet named. The first signal is unusual steadiness. Situations that would have triggered panic 3 months ago now produce something different in you, not numbness, not denial, but a settled quality that you cannot fully explain. Your hands are steady when they should be shaking. Your voice is calm when the circumstance says it should not be. This is not personality. This is the internal architecture holding weight it was designed to hold. The foundation the architect built through every painful season is now operational. You are experiencing what it feels like when construction is complete enough to bear load. The second signal is unexpected access. Someone contacts you without explanation. A door opens that you did not knock on. An opportunity surfaces in a space you had no connection to. This is not luck. This is the architect positioning others toward you at the same time he is positioning you. When God places someone, he also adjusts the environment around them. People, resources, timing to match the assignment. The third signal is sudden clarity about things that were previously opaque. Decisions that confused you for months suddenly have an obvious answer. Directions that felt foggy become specific. Not full visibility, not the entire road illuminated at once, but enough light for the next step. And in the economy of faith, the next step is always enough. The architect does not flood the path with light, because flooded light eliminates the need for trust. He gives you just enough to move, and movement is where trust becomes tangible. The fourth signal is relational reorganization. You did not plan it, but your circle is shifting. Some people have quietly moved to the edges. Others, people you did not expect, have moved closer. The composition of your daily life is changing without your engineering, and it feels less like loss and more like curation. That is the architect adjusting the team for the next phase of the build. The fifth signal is a change in appetite. You want different things than you wanted a year ago. Less interest in being impressive, more interest in being aligned. Less need for people to understand your journey, more need for God to direct it. Your desires have migrated from the surface to the center, from image to substance, from applause to assignment. That migration is not maturity you manufactured. It is the result of every season you walked through, rearranging your internal priorities without your conscious effort. If you recognize even one of these signals, do not dismiss it as coincidence. Name it, acknowledge it. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet recognition that the architect's work is surfacing. You are being positioned, and you are not the only one. Hebrews 12 verse 1. We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. That cloud is not only ancient, it is being added to every day by people like you who walked through the dark and did not quit. And someone right now is watching your life without your knowledge. Not because you are performing, because you are still standing. And your standing is giving them permission to believe they can stand too. You are already evidence before you become anything else. The question now is what you do with this position, and that is where we finish. There is someone listening to this right now at 2 in the morning because sleep will not come. There is someone hearing these words on the way to a job they do not love, but show up to every day because responsibility is not optional. There is someone who just closed their banking app because the number on the screen felt like a verdict. 3 different lives, one common thread still here, still listening, still standing, and that is what the architect has been waiting for. God did not wait for you to stop doubting. He did not wait for your prayer life to become consistent or your faith to feel solid every morning. He waited for something far more rare than perfection. He waited for you to remain honest while remaining present. To stay in the room with him when every instinct said to walk out. To keep showing up at the door, even when no one seemed to answer. That combination, honesty plus presence, is what heaven calls readiness. And you have been ready longer than you know. Everything you walked through brought you here. The loss was not waste. It was clearance, the architect removing what would have collapsed under the weight of what is coming. The silence was not absence. It was the architect working on levels you could not hear, adjusting the internal wiring, recalibrating the foundation, testing load-bearing walls that only silence can test. The boundaries were not rejection of people. They were protection of assignment. And the mastery, the quiet authority you now carry without needing anyone to confirm it, that is the operating system for the season you are entering. You do not need another sign. You do not need another prophetic word. You do not need someone to stand in front of you and declare what God already whispered in the silence of your hardest nights. The evidence is not out there somewhere waiting to arrive. The evidence is biographical. Look behind you. Count the number of moments that were designed to make you quit, and then count the fact that you are still here. That arithmetic is your confirmation. You survived a curriculum that was built to either break you or build you, and you are not broken, you are built. Isaiah stood in the presence of God, and his first words were not confidence. They were confession, I am unclean. And God did not reject the confession. He responded to it, cleansed it, and then asked the question that changed everything. Who shall I send? Isaiah's answer was not born from certainty. It was born from willingness shaped by honesty. Here am I, send me. Not here am I fully prepared and completely confident. Just here am I, present, honest, available. That is the same posture you're standing in right now, whether you named it or not. Anointed one, if something in you is responding to this, not with hype, but with a quiet, grounded recognition, hold that. Do not perform a response. Do not manufacture an emotion. Just notice what is already there. A steadiness that was not there 6 months ago. A clarity that is still forming but already sharper than anything you carried before. That is not adrenaline, that is capacity. The architect built it in you through every season you thought was meaningless, and it will hold what comes next. If these words reached the place in you that needed reaching, not because I said them well, but because they arrived at the right moment, then carry them forward. Send this to someone walking through their own silence right now. Someone who needs to hear that God is not waiting for their perfection, not for the algorithm, Because somewhere tonight, someone is sitting on the edge of their bed, wondering if any of this matters, and your decision to share might be the answer they were not expecting to receive. Stay close to this. Subscribe not for numbers, but because what is being built here between you and this message and the architect behind it needs the patience of seasons. Like everything God builds, one step, one chapter, one honest moment at a time. Peace over you. Go now, not because you are perfect, because you are ready.